Welcome, comrades and friends, to this internationalist group labor forum. From Italy to the Bay Area, longshore power and crucial struggles facing the working class today. We're meeting here in the Henry Schmidt room, a historic room. Let me just start off with a couple announcements. Everybody has seen the literature table in the back. You should check out The Internationalist, Revolution, and Marxism and Education. There are restrooms. There's one co-ed restroom right there, and then one men's room, but you know, downstairs. There's water in the back. Everybody feel free to grab some water and stay hydrated. Just pick up after yourselves, please. There will be a discussion section after the speakers all speak, so just hold your questions and comments until the end of that. So we're going to hear from two speakers today. First, David Newton, radical trade unionist, ILWU Local 10 executive board member, and Balma treasurer. And then we're going to hear from Jack Heyman, longtime union militant, an ILWU Local 10 retiree, and supporter of the Internationalist Group and the League for the Fourth International. I'd also like to dedicate this event to Chris Knox, revolutionary union militant, whose obituary you can read in The Internationalist. The timing of this forum is important. Trump's all-out assault on immigrants is clearly escalating. We've all seen the video footage from Chicago, from Los Angeles, and New York of immigrants getting beaten and kidnapped by masked Gestapo agents. Videos of protesters and indignant community members getting beaten and brutalized when trying to step in to do something about it. Just a few weeks ago, the federal thugs raided an apartment building in a black and brown neighborhood in Chicago, arresting citizens and non-citizens alike, ransacking their apartments, stealing their belongings, separating children from their parents, a clear example of racist state terror. The attacks on immigrants has meant an attack on the rights of us all. Some of the most basic democratic rights hang in the balance. As revolutionary Marxists point out, under capitalism, the type of democracy that we're used to is bourgeois democracy. But even bourgeois democracy is sometimes cast aside when the ruling class sees fit. And that's what's going on right now. Trump is leading a steady march toward authoritarian, strong state rule. The Democrats have been posing as the party of resistance. But we have to remember that the Democrats are the party of genocide. They're the party of imperialist war. And they're the party of deportation. We have to remember that Obama was the deporter-in-chief and holds the record for the most deportations of any U.S. president. The Democrats actually paved the way for Trump. They have set the table for him, from Clinton to Obama to Biden. The Democrats have strengthened the executive branch. They've been building the concentration camps, building the prison industrial complex, increasing the military budget, investing in surveillance, beefing up border security. They cannot and will not stop the deportations or Trump's agenda. Any call to rely on the Democrats or to support them in any way serves to chain the workers' movement to their oppressors. Trump's all-sided attacks on our rights need to be answered. No king's parades are not enough, even with millions in the streets. What is needed is workers' action. That's why we're here today. What is needed is the kind of thing that has been carried out in Italy for mass workers' strikes. And this does not manifest overnight. This must be organized. It's no secret that after decades of misleadership, the labor movement in this country is incredibly disorganized. Although it has great potential power, the union tops put millions of dollars into campaigns for the Democrats instead of in strike funds, instead of in organizing drives. They chain the workers' movement. The union bureaucracy does. They chain the workers' movement to the Democrats and sometimes even to the Republicans. They stand in the way of building a fighting labor movement. If we really mean the motto, an injury to one is an injury to all, we need to organize worker strikes to stop the deportations, to defend the Palestinians. If there is a federal invasion here in the Bay, labor should shut it down from the city to the town, from the north to the south.
Shut it down.
That's right. This can only happen independently of the Democrat capitalist politicians, independently of the Mamdanis, of the Brandon Johnsons, of the Barbara Lees, who want to take all of this outrage that workers and oppressed people are feeling and funnel it back into the Democratic Party. For our part, the Internationalist Group has been organizing labor committees to defend immigrants in New York and in Portland, to organize a working class response to the attacks on immigrants, a response that is independent of the forces that would see to it that the workers' movement is crushed if it ever threatens their rule. If it ever threatens capitalist rule, the Democrats will crush the workers' movement along with Trump. What we need instead in this coming struggle is to forge a class struggle workers' party, because the only way out of this barbaric capitalist nightmare is international socialist revolution. So with that, we'll hear from our first speaker, Brother Newt.
Before we go too far, I have to say 2 words. Fuck Trump. But I need you to say it with me. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Fuck Trump. Okay, now you've all been charged with treason because you're going against the United States government by definition of treason. But we are all guilty of treason. But I charge that the head of state should be charged with treason for disrespecting this country, disrespecting the world in general, disrespecting humanity, disrespecting all morals of human obligation to each other. I believe we're all sound mind and body of the same thought process in today's government. We should be appalled at who is the head of state, a racist, fascist, pig. But oddly, we shouldn't be, because we've never had proper representation at the head of state, in my opinion. This is just the bottom of the totem pole. We finally scraped the bottom of the barrel, the ocean floor, if you will. I've been told to remind people that our labor union, the ILWU Local 10, has been intertwined with the Black Panther Party of self-defense since it began to be integrated and the party was in existence. There are so many rank and filers that you can never name all of them or even come close to it. Notable names would be our comrade David Hilliard, my cousin Sweet Jimmy, Angela Davis was very much a part of our struggle, and she was the first activist, I believe, to be represented on a strike campaign to be released from a civil rights standpoint. Dr. Martin Luther King is an honorary member of Local 10, just as Paul Robeson. Danny Glover was recently made an honorary member, and fittingly, Angela Davis. Sitting next to me is our version of John Brown, Jack Heyman, and he'll be speaking next. Jack Heyman and I went to South Africa on a mission to, I guess, realign our services with the South African Union Labor Party, NUMSA, services, and we collaborated to work together. And they not only supported our movements, but they also supported Mumia Abu-Jamal, who has to be recognized today as someone that has been in the struggle of captivity for, I don't know, maybe going on 50 years, which is shameful. But no more shameful than Donald Trump being the president of the United States. None of this should be surprising. When we have true uprising, then people are shocked. To give an example, George Floyd was murdered, as we all know. And it was shocking to come into the living room and everybody see this man's head be kneeled on, and they act like that was a new thing. And it was front page news, black man victimized, black man murdered by a police person. Another story that should have been told that day was a story like Huey P. Newton when he encountered the police of the same mind as George Floyd encountered. But in that story, the police person ended up being killed, and Huey was shot, went to trial, and was later released from prison. That's a story that should have been told with George Floyd while people stood around and watched this man be murdered. No one threw a bottle. No one, I feel 100% confident George Floyd would rather be here today. But that's not a story that's told too often. Nelson Mandela, I don't know how many decades he served in prison, but when he came out, he thanked the ILWU for supporting his cause and shutting down the shipping of goods going to and from South Africa and causing a rift in that pipeline. And he felt that that was a significant role in him being released from prison. And that's how important the cargo is today. If we stand down on business, as they say today, if we stand down on solidarity, which is a union term, if we stand down on just being moral human beings and stop the handling of goods that are going to murder more people, I think we'll have a different outcome the next day. I think that will be felt across the world. I know it will. From my visit, our visit, the union's visit, it was a whole delegation that went there. Not that we didn't know already, but it reaffirmed where the mindset is of today. Big Brother Jack Heyman recently went to Italy with other like minds, and I believe they're ready to go to war, and we're already at war. Blood has already been shed. So I know we're talking about this, but it needs to be said and action needs to be done. it's so many issues right now. With the tariff wars, you drive down our maritime street, so many dark cranes every night. They've already launched missiles at us. For us to be afraid to launch the missile back as a reaction, I don't even know why we're talking about it, honestly. It should just be automatic. Government shutdowns. Labor is finally being hit in the pocket. I mean, what's going on today is shameful, but again, it shouldn't be shameful because we've been born into shame. Coming into this country, we were born into shame. My brother Jack Heyman doesn't know this, but we did a DNA tree on my family, and a huge percentage of that is Jewish. And we knew that. Our Jewish name is Simon. So with that, they call us black Jews. And as a black Jew, they messed up because we want to hit the pockets, and we're not scared to go to war and throw physical blows in whichever way that means, mentally, spiritually, and you take it for what it's worth. I won't take too much of your time. My name is David Newton. I'm a member of Local 10, rank and file, as it was stated, and I appreciate everybody coming out here today and showing support. And all I can say, as my brother Emil would say, protect your job, protect your body, protect your spirit, and let's go to work.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, Newt is the nephew of Black Panther Huey P. Newton, so thank you for that. This Local 10 was also the first to hold a rally to free Angela Davis when she was kept as a class war prisoner, and is important in the struggle to free Mumia, the foremost class war prisoner in the United States. They also initiated the West Coast-wide port shutdown on Juneteenth of 2020 to stop racist police terror. I just wanted to mention those things, but next we'll hear from Jack Heyman.
Thank you, Brother Newt. You just forgot one little thing. I know it wasn't just intentional, but Brother David Hilliard was in Local 10, and so was Clarence Thomas. And Clarence Thomas has worked with me in doing a number of actions that we've taken over the years. I just wanted to give recognition to both David Hilliard and Clarence Thomas. So, Local 10 is known as the Red and Black Union. Black because, as Newt was saying, we had a number of members from the Black Panther Party who over the years have been active in Local 10. And red because of our politics. I just want to read a short list of some of the Reds that were in this local here. First of all, during the big strike in 1934, one of the leaders of that strike was Henry Schmidt. He's in the photograph back there, leading longshoremen and seamen in a strike on the Embarcadero. Harry Bridges, who was the first international president, and Henry Schmidt, and Jermaine Bulkey, who was the first president of this local, were members of what was called the Albion Hall Group. It was a group of militant longshoremen that were fed up with the bureaucratic leadership in New York of Joe Ryan, and they organized what became a coast-wide strike in 1934. So we can't forget the contributions that those three made. And then there was Lou Goldblack, who was, Lou was a a supporter of the Stalinist Communist Party. He contributed many things to our union. One in particular that sticks to my mind is in 1948, there was a sugar workers conference in Havana, Cuba. And Lou went to that because the ILWU not only represents longshoremen and warehousemen, we also represent plantation workers in Hawaii. And that used to be the bulk of the membership, actually, at one point. And so he went to Havana for that conference to raise the living standard and wages of the most oppressed wage slaves, the sugar workers. And the leader of the sugar workers in Cuba was a guy named Jesus Menendez. Jesus Menendez was a very tall, black leader of the Sugar Workers Union, and he convened that conference, and shortly after that conference, he was murdered, assassinated by the Cuban military. And that was one of the decisive moments in the history of the Cuban Revolution, because his body was put on a train in Oriente province, where most of the blacks who came in to Cuba as slaves came into Oriente province. He was put on a train there, and his body stopped at every city on the way to Havana. And when it reached Havana, there were 250,000, 250,000 people, demonstrating against the government in defense of Jesus Menendez. That's how I remember Lou Goldblatt. I think that was an important contribution that he made. The ILWU slogan of an injury to one is an injury to all, you can see on the wall back there. Doesn't mean we just look out for longshoremen. It meant all means all, people in the working class and even those that aren't in the working class. And today, the internationalist groups raises the slogan that we need to defend the rights of all. So let me just quickly go through a couple of other names. There is Jack Hall was the head of the ILWU in Hawaii. He was the regional director, and one of his staff members, A.Q. McElrath, she was also a Central Committee member of the Communist Party in Hawaii. A.Q. was here in San Francisco in 2003, after the invasion. And at the convention, what came up was I had been arrested by the police in the port of Oakland across the bay, and was being victimized for protesting against the war in Iraq. I'd given a speech a couple weeks before in London, the largest audience that I'd ever spoken before, 1 million people. But these mass demonstrations also happened in Rome and in Paris as well. Millions of people out in the street protesting against the imperialist wars. Actually, the important thing I'm mentioning about these two individuals from Hawaii is that in this whole period of the McCarthy period, the anti-red hysteria, there was only one strike to defend the victims of McCarthyism, and that was in Hawaii. It was led by the sugar workers in Hawaii. For 4 days, they had a strike to demand the charges be dropped against Jack Hall and what was called the Hawaii 7. That's an important part of our history, by the way. Archie Green was a wobbly. Howard Kaler and Leo Robinson were the organizers of the 1984 anti-apartheid strike that we had right here in the port of San Francisco. Nelson Mandela was in prison on Robben Island when we did that action. And this was in the middle of the Reagan era, where he broke the PATCO strike, very ostentatiously had the leaders of the PATCO strike in chains like slaves, their feet and their arms in chains, and hauled them before the media to show the capitalists in this country, the big corporate bankers, that this is the way you treat workers who strike. Sound familiar? That's what Trump was attempting to do when he said that, remind me, who's the head of Tesla? Elon Musk. When Elon Musk fired strikers who were trying to organize in his plant, Donald Trump said, good, do it more. That's what we need to see in this country. So this is what we're up against now. But in that atmosphere of repression under Reagan, we in the ILWU took a strike action against a ship from South Africa, and Nelson Mandela commended us for that action, saying that that action was in the forefront of the anti-apartheid movement in this country. We were on the front lines, and we're proud of that as well. Leo Robinson amended Howard's resolution, and together that amended resolution passed that we would work the ship but not work the cargo from South Africa. Stan Gow was also a militant in the union. Lawrence Thibault, Asher Harrer, who was on the strike committee in 1948 and on the national committee of the Socialist Workers' Party. Sean Maloney was one of the Minneapolis Teamsters who organized Over the Road, the big campaign that made the Teamsters what they are today, a mass trade union, the largest in the country at that time. Sean Maloney was president of Local 19 in Seattle, and in 1971 during the Vietnam War. And then there was Bill Bailey. Now, some of you may know the story of Bill Bailey, but there's an interesting book written on him, The Kid from Hoboken. And Bill Bailey was a veteran of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. But before that, he and a bunch of young communists boarded a ship in New York Harbor called the Bremen. And the Bremen was flying the swastika in 1935 on the bow of the ship. And these brave young men went up the gangway and tore down the swastika up on the bow. They were immediately attacked by the crew and the police. It became a big case in New York City. In the end, the charges were dropped against them. And that was an important victory for the working class. There's one other thing about Bill Bailey that I wanted to mention. So the ship that he and his gang went up the gangway to tear down the swastika was the same ship my mother's family came over fleeing the Nazis in 1938, the Bremen. And so there's an interesting connection there. So one last name I did forget to mention was this meeting is dedicated to Chris Knox. Chris Knox was the trade union director of the Spartacus League back in the 1970s when they were doing serious implantation into the various industries, in maritime, in steel, telephone, auto, and so forth. And he researched what communists should be doing in the trade unions. And his research went back to Lenin and Trotsky. And he theorized, he took these theories and put them together for us in this country and in the 70s to run on caucuses or rank and file committees in the union on a class struggle basis. And if you have time, I have some of my original beacons. That was our newspaper in the National Maritime Union back then. And we also, at that time, were opposed to the war in Vietnam, and we called for strikes against the war. That's what class struggle trade unionists do. They oppose imperialist wars. So Bob Mandel was the leader of the Militant Caucus, which was based on a class struggle program. And in 1975, KNC glassworkers over in Union City were on strike. They were immigrant workers, many of them undocumented, and the union bureaucracy was not defending them, not supporting their strike. So Bob and Stan Gow, whose name I mentioned, and Howard Kaler were part of this militant caucus, and they organized other warehouses in the area to come together and defend and support on the picket line the immigrant workers who were striking at KNC. And that was the basis, that strike, in which they were successful. That strike became the basis for the militant caucus being formed in the ILWU. One thing I did forget, Jermaine Bulkey, who I mentioned up front, one of the leftists who was a leader in the 34 strike. In this very room, when I was inducted into the ILWU in 1989, Jermaine Bulkey sat right here, and he talked to us, giving us an educational about how the 34 strike was organized. And it was really compelling because I was a young guy back then, and he gave a real vivid account of how the police attacked the strikers, seamen and longshoremen, up on Rincon Hill in San Francisco on horseback, and how the workers who were striking fought back. That was so compelling for me and very moving. And Jermaine Bulkey, who sat there and explained this to us, teaching us the lesson of class struggle, he died a couple of years after that presentation. So that was very moving for me. So the ILWU was built by Reds, all right? They were communists of all different stripes, Stalinists, Trotskyists, social democrats, anarcho-syndicalists. I just said anarcho-syndicalists. I don't know. What were the Wobblies? Okay, so, yeah. So during the McCarthy period, they went after the Reds in the National Maritime Union, the seamen, the largest union in the country. They went after 11 unions in all, not just ILWU, but 11 unions in all were purged out of the CIO in this anti-red hysteria. That was over 1 million workers who lost union representation, lost their jobs. And this McCarthy period wasn't just something abstract. It had very concrete meaning, so that the head of the Marine Cooks and Stewards Union, Huey Bryson, was thrown in jail because Congress said he lied to them when he said he wasn't a member of the Communist Party. So union leaders were jailed. And then there was Ferdinand Smith in the National Maritime Union, where I started out. And Ferdinand Smith was a supporter of the Communist Party, and he was Jamaican, and he was deported. A lot of the leaders during the 30s who built unions were immigrants. Immigrants. Harry Bridges was an immigrant. The question of defending immigrants is essential to class struggle in any industrialized country. That's why we fight so hard to defend immigrants. Yeah, there's one other interesting thing about this red period. So in Hawaii, they set up a committee to investigate communists, and they said Jack Hall was a leading communist, and there were a number of other ILWU members who were communists. They were called the Hawaii Seven. And I just touched on this a little bit before, but what happened was they actually went on strike for 4 days and demanded that the charges be dropped. And in the end, they were dropped. But again, that was the only strike during this anti-red period, was in Hawaii. So what are we facing today? Well, Trump has furloughed 750,000 some workers federal workers in DC. He's fired another 300,000. That's about 1 million workers who are out of work. And what is the AFL-CIO, the union bureaucrats, doing? Absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. And if an injury to one is an injury to all is to be implemented, then they should be organizing strikes. They should shut down the government, every part of the government, and get those workers back to work again. But the union bureaucracy is always a stumbling block. It's always an obstacle to whenever you want to take serious class struggle action. That's how this union was built. The first obstacle to having an organized strike that went coastwide was to fight the union bureaucracy, so that once you get them out of the way, you can take on the employers and the capitalist government that stands behind them. This happened over and over again in the 30s. There was, well, let me finish this point on what's happening. Aside from workers getting laid off and furloughed, there are the National Guard being called out. I think Will and maybe Newt touched on this a little bit, but they're walking around like a bunch of fascist goons, attacking, arresting immigrant workers, and not only immigrant workers. It's people with darker skins. You know, this is outright racist, and it's terrorizing a lot of families. But you know what? The bright side on that is that people are starting to fight back, especially in Chicago. Will, you just came back from Chicago. I wish you would have talked about that a little bit more. But that's where struggle begins, is defending the most oppressed, and they're beginning to fight back. That kind of struggle has to be extended geographically and politically. So the other thing going on is that the universities are being intimidated, and protesters against the genocidal war in Gaza are being expelled. Professors, too, are losing their jobs, because if you protest against Israel, the government says that that is anti-Semitic. That's nonsense, but it's the kind of terror that is reigning right now on the universities and the campuses around the country. Yeah, so this trope of criticizing Israel or protesting against Israel's genocidal war is having a tremendous effect, a repressive effect on the campuses across the country. Then there's the question of Ukraine. I don't know how closely everyone's paying attention here, but the key city in the Donbass region for the Ukrainian forces has just been surrounded. It's about to fall. The Ukrainian army, it's of course not just the Ukrainian army, it's NATO, the anti-communist NATO is behind this. The United States government is behind this. And so what we're seeing is that there's going to be a collapse in the Ukraine imminently. So Trump is like attacking all over the place at once. Now he's sending a naval armada down to Venezuela, which I'm sure Ricardo is going to speak on later. But, you know, U.S. imperialism is crumbling. It's not what it was 20 years ago. And so, for the first time, Russia, not the Soviet Union, Russia sent missiles to Venezuela so they can protect themselves against an imminent invasion or attack by the U.S. forces, who, well, for a couple hundred years, the United States has been the main dominant power in the Western Hemisphere, and they base all their actions on treating the rest of the Western Hemisphere as a colony on the Monroe Doctrine. But that's being challenged today in Venezuela. And then, of course, the competition with China is really the big issue at stake here. China is not going to back down. I mean, if little Venezuela, little only in comparison to the U.S., is openly defending itself with Russian missiles, China has the ability to defend itself. They don't need support from Russia, although there is sort of a mutual pact that they would defend each other. So attacking China and so many other countries with tariffs is destabilizing the world capitalist order, not just the U.S. And it's directly impacting Longshore. With high tariffs, that cuts into trade. And when Trump first did this back in the early part of the year, instituting something like 145% increase in tariff, it immediately impacted the workers in Los Angeles and Long Beach. One of the union officials there said it's 50% of the workforce, 50% were out of work when those tariffs went in. So it has a tremendous effect on the work of longshoremen who are at the nexus point of global trade on the docks. So in the 30s, the CIO, which was the radical wing, the left wing of the trade union movement, was organizing against the bosses. It wasn't just here in San Francisco. There was a general strike here. There was another one in Minneapolis with the Teamsters. And then a third one in Toledo with the auto light workers. But what I found interesting about the trade union well, all three of the trade unions had one thing in common, a couple things in common. They were led by Reds, number one. They mobilized masses of workers that were confronted by police and the National Guard being called out, and they killed strikers in each of these three cities. And it provoked a mass reaction, a general strike here in the Bay Area, a massive strike in Minneapolis, and the same in Toledo. So they fought back against this kind of repression. And there was, you know, in the midst of what followed World War II, was the McCarthy period. So they organized effectively in the CIO. And after World War II came the McCarthy period, where trade unionists were attacked and unions were destroyed. In the midst of all this, the ILWU, Harry Bridges, was opposed to the Korean War, which was starting up. The Korean War was used against the CIO unions that were leftist or led by leftists, rather, and that was the basis for expelling them from the CIO. And so that's one thing that I found fascinating about our union. We were the only one to take a position against the Korean War. So other things that we've learned about when things are tough, you don't just stick your head in the sand and wait till things blow over. You have to fight back, and that's what they did in the 30s and again in the 40s. For instance, one of the things that we learned from fighting back against this repression was that, well, in this union, they tried to deport the leader of the union, Harry Bridges, back to Australia. That effort was defeated because they knew if they would deport the leader of the Longshore Union, that there'd be a strike on the West Coast. So that never happened. But here are some of the important lessons we learned about fighting back. In 1980, when I first came out to the West Coast, there was a black family, ILWU, a longshoreman from this local, that moved into a previously all-white neighborhood in El Sobrante. His name was Presley Roosevelt. And his home was being attacked and firebombed. And the union, Local 10 and others, I think Local 6, actually Stan was part of the Defense Guard. They organized Defense Guards to defend against these racists. And it's interesting because some of the union bureaucrats wanted to just hire security guards, but the members here said, no, we're going to have our own defense force. And so, as Stan explained it to me, the workers who were defending the house weren't armed on the outside, but on the inside, they were armed. And with that kind of defense, the racists stopped firebombing the house, and the family was able to live there. But that's kind of the defense that needs to be done now. This was done in the 1938, the Teamsters in Minneapolis were faced with the silver shirts. The silver shirts were the equivalent of the brown shirts of Nazi Germany. And the silver shirts were terrorizing trade unionists, leftists, and so forth. And so, what's his name? Sorry, my name's, Sean Maloney. Okay, so Sean Maloney had been a Teamster. Now he later on became a longshoreman. But I talked to Sean, and he told me when these silver shirts came to Minneapolis, we organized against them. He said, and it was very effective. We had defense guards, and we raised money. He said, I went up to the Jewish shopkeepers in Minneapolis, and he spoke a little Yiddish. And he said, well, we went up to the Jewish shopkeepers, and we said, can you give us a few shekels so we can defend you against these fascist goyim? That was Yiddish for non-Jews. But he actually spoke the language. And that's how they raised money, to defend themselves against the silver shirts. It was very effective. I think another thing that we were able to do in 2003, when there were massive demonstrations around the world against the war in Iraq, we in Local 10 put forward a resolution for all the ports on the West Coast to shut down against the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And in 2003, that was the very beginning of the invasion of Iraq. Later on, the imperialist wars were both in Iraq and Afghanistan simultaneously. The Democrats got power in the House of Representatives in 2006, and still the war continued. And we had a resolution from this local that went to the convention that said that we, members of the ILWU, supported the Democrats when they said they were the party of peace. But the war hasn't ended. The war is continuing. We need to use our power to bring an end to the war. And so in 2008, we actually had a strike. I think it was the first one. You can check this in your history books. But it was the first strike in this country, in the U.S., against a U.S. imperialist war. And that's the kind of way that the working class needs to be implementing today to fight against the attacks from the Trump administration. And it's not just the Trump administration. The Democrats are going along with it. And the main question today is, politically speaking, is how are we going to fight this right now impending, it could be fascist government. I don't think it's fascist now, but it's certainly an oppressive a government in many ways, very authoritarian. I would say it's more Bonapartist than actually fascist. If it's fascist, you wouldn't be out in the street demonstrating. It's a total dictatorship. People will not be able to exercise their rights, which is one reason that we're calling for defend the rights of all of us. Free speech, the right to a job, and so forth. I think that's one of the key issues of today. It's just building an independent working class that's going to be able to fight against the capitalist order, this decaying capitalist system. And the way that is done is by not just waiting for elections to happen. A real workers' party, a revolutionary party, would be mobilizing the workers, for instance, in Washington. It's woe is me kind of feeling from the AFL-CIO bureaucracy. What can we do? Isn't it terrible what's happening? No, we could take action, actually, to shut down Washington, period. And if it expands, if there's repression, there will be reaction to that oppression. A workers' party would be in the forefront of organizing mobilizations, number one, to defend immigrants, and number two, to fight the oppressed. Not just immigrants, but workers who happen to be on strike or laid off. That's what a real workers' party would do. And you know what? I'm going to just finish with talking about my experience in Genoa, Italy. So I went there in September, and Italy was on fire. The ports were being shut down to refuse to load military cargo to Israel. And this was a European Dockworkers Conference that was called, and I was invited to be there. One of the points that I made was that, you know, we all all of these different unions are coming together, and they have differences between themselves. And I basically said what Lenin said in my speech to the conference. I said, you know, you have your differences, but you need to, when we have differences, we march separately, but we have the same goal, so we strike together. It's that kind of a strategy that's needed now. And so, yeah, there are a lot of different organizations that are upset with what's going on, but I think that until we realize that there's not, the Democratic Party is the graveyard of every social movement, whether it's the civil rights movement, the women's movement, you name it, gay and so forth. You know, they are not going to defend workers. Just to give you one example of that, because people talk about Biden and Obama. When the Obama administration was in power, we had a major strike going on in grain up in the Northwest. And Occupy was willing to work with the ILWU to stop this scab ship coming into port. And it was going to be very effective. So we had a caravan organized through the Central Labor Council here in San Francisco and Alameda Labor Council. We connected with the Portland Labor Council and the Seattle, or Kings County Labor Council, that we were all going to converge on Longview, Washington, where the strike was taking place, the picketing. And we're going to stop the scab ship. And what happened was the Obama administration, and Biden was vice president, sent armed Coast Guard cutters. A lot of people don't know about this because the bourgeois media doesn't cover it effectively. But they sent armed Coast Guard cutters to escort the scab ship, and they put pressure on the Union International president to sign a contract in which he capitulated. He caved in and signed the contract. But it was the Democratic Party that enabled the scab ship to come in and attempt to break that action. So I'll pick up other sort of points during the discussion. If you have questions, feel free to take the mic and we'll have an excellent discussion. I just want to say one other thing about Local 10 and being a red union. The preamble to Local 10's Constitution says, we recognize by experience that organization of the working class and unity of action is essential and necessary to combat the encroachment of capital on the fundamental rights of labor. Karl Marx could have written that same thing. We are rooted in a radical tradition, and we need to bring that back to the fore today. Implement class struggle in the trade unions, and the ILWU can play a role in that. And what can I say? We need, the one thing that we need to do, we have a meeting coming up on Tuesday, an executive board, Newt. The leader of the Greek Dockworkers Union has charges against him because a year ago, they had a very effective strike in Piraeus, Greece, that refused to load military weapons to Israel. Now, a year later, the president of that union, Marcos Bekris, is being charged. And we in Local 10 need to defend him. And that you're on the executive board, so we need to make sure that gets raised at the executive board and they understand the importance of an injury to one is an injury to all. Thank you.
But I want to preface it with a few things. I'm Emily, by the way. I just retired from ILWU Local 10 after 22 years. So Jack laid out what's a truism, which is that the labor movement in this country was built by Reds. The problem is there's too few Reds in the trade union movement today, and most of the left doesn't even see that as a problem. Local 10 does have a history of taking some exemplary actions against U.S. imperialism, not just against U.S. war, in Chile, over South Africa, El Salvador. But what you have to understand is that those actions, which were one-time actions and token actions in a way, were only taken because there were leftists fighting within Local 10 against the bureaucrats who opposed it and who finally gave way to token actions. But they were fighting for an ongoing boycott of goods to Chile after Pinochet takeover. They were fighting for an ongoing boycott of goods to El Salvador over the war there. So class struggle unionists, yes, oppose not just imperialist war, but imperialism. I voted, Jack, for your resolution that you put forward and Local 10 adopted for an arms boycott. The ILWU should undertake an arms boycott against the genocide. And I thought we should work together on that. We should work together when we can agree. Now, what you didn't mention is that the policy of the Democrats, of the bureaucracy in supporting the Democrats, has only furthered a massive polarization in the working class, where those workers who want change have been driven into Trump's arms, and that's a factor in this union in the Pacific Northwest and even in Local 10. And so I want to know, the other division in the union, let me just finish my question, is the tiers question. And I helped found, and we raised a bunch of fights in Local 10. Yeah. Well, I want to know what Jack thinks. I think I've handed out most of this. Jack never talks about the committee to end tier segregation and the tiers within this union that cripple its ability to fight for itself, let alone for Palestine. And I want to know what you think of our mission statement.
There is an intense economic, by some have called a long recession, or some other Marxist economists have stated that we might go even deeper than that. But anyways, the United States is, facing inter-imperialist competition and from other focuses or sectors of, the world economy. And one of the things it's doing is increasing its tide over what is their backyard. Even during Sleepy Joe's term, he sent the head of the United States Southern Command to Argentina to say publicly that the road of lithium made by Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, and other Latin American countries was essential for the United States' interest. Actually, she said it's part of our national interest. And now it's circling and promoting publicly the Trump administration is a stranglehold on Venezuela, surrounding Venezuela by provocations. And, in 2003, we in Puerto Rico kicked out the American Navy's hated fighting ranges. And now Trump is coming back and using the former base of Roosevelt Roads to land F-35s and other, weaponry to threaten Venezuela. So we have to do united front against imperialist war as attacks of revolutionary workers.
I'm Elizabeth Milos, and I'm a retired member of UPTE, University of Professional Technical Employees, CWA. And I want to address something that has to do with basically being willing to do our activism and also actually do our activism within our own unions and confront our leadership. My union had passed a resolution for Palestine in 2021, and then the new leadership scrubbed it. And so I belong to UPTE Members for Palestine. We had to form this group to do this. But we also, within our union, we had also, in the Peace and Social Justice Committee that was formed and then later disbanded, we had formed a committee dealing with the issue of police brutality and funding the police force. And now more than ever, we need to be able to tie those issues. And I know the ILWU Local 10 has been at the forefront of this in fighting against police brutality, because Israel has played a very, very damaging and nefarious role in training the U.S. police force and in the militarization and in the weapons that have been battle-tested against Palestinians are being used in U.S. cities today. So there is a lot of issues that we can bring those issues together with Palestine from our communities and among our workers. There's also been resolutions that have been passed by labor councils, and I was part of the attempt to try to get our resolutions passed to the Labor Council of San Francisco. But many times these resolutions, nobody does anything with them. But when you try to bring the resolutions that you pass at your locals to the Labor Councils or anywhere else, and you try to make them make our leadership accountable, you get marginalized and not supported. I just want to make one last comment, if it's possible, with regard to the CWA convention. CWA convention last August did something it was very harmful, what happened there. The News Guild having the opportunity to be able to present a resolution on Palestine, and the CWA for Palestine having the opportunity to present resolution on Palestine at the CWA convention, instead was not able to, and unfortunately the leadership passed this so-called international solidarity resolution, which was very harmful because it supported the U.S. aid, which is part of the right arm of the U.S. government's interventionist policies, and also it supported a two-state solution. So I think we need to bring those ties together. Thank you.
And I'm a supporter of international group. I have a comment and a question. The first comment is internationalism. We need a party in America, in the land of chauvinism, to defend China, to defend Russia against U.S. imperialist attacks. United Front, fine, but it's the party that can bring internationalism that we need in this land, in America, the land of chauvinists. So that's my comment. Build a party, build the internationalist communist party. Question on Italy, Gerald mentioned that. I was listening to Spark Talk. The ICL Pro, he was talking about gloom and doom, and we need to dig in and let this blow. In relation to Italy general strike in defense of Palestinians and condemning the genocide, he said it was the last gasp. Now, that is important, what he said. I want to contrast that with what Brother Jack is laying out in here, which is fighting back. And what the ICL is putting out is dig in. Let this thing blow. And that's not what we need. We need a fighting party.
I'm glad I got to go after Mo, because I'm a supporter of the Spartacus League, and I'd like to respond to that. So yeah, in Italy, we have a group there, and we put out a statement about it, and we said this is a really important development. This is a really escalation of the struggle. It's a really good thing that there was this strike, these two massive strikes, and that the working class is getting involved. But that, how do you make this not just a symbolic action? There is a danger that this is just going to be a flash in the pan, that this is going to be a release of steam that doesn't actually build into anything greater, especially with the ceasefire deal that was just concluded, that really takes the air out of the whole Palestinian movement, and everybody's being pressured to just celebrate this great victory and this great peace and to move on. So how do you make sure that that doesn't happen? And the way you do that is by acknowledging what was the gains and the moves forward that were made in Italy, but also what remains to be done, the divisions that still exist there. And a lot of the working class in Italy is resentful of the fact that these unions mobilize these massive general strikes in defense of Palestine, but have done nothing of the sort to defend their interests on the job. And it creates a division between the left and the working working class. And you see that, similar thing going on in this country, where a lot of the working class doesn't want anything to do with leftists because they think that they're people who talk about arcane things and want to take, food out of their mouths to give it to somebody else. And so that's because the left has really been capitulating to liberalism all this time. And the progressive union leaders, both in Italy and also in this country, have played a huge role in keeping the working class chained behind the capitalist parties and behind this liberal program. And so they have to be exposed. And so it's like, there's been a lot of symbolic resolutions and a lot of symbolic statements passed in different unions, but like, how do you go beyond that? It's by taking on the obstacles. And Jack, you clearly know a lot about history, and this is a big history lesson, but how do you employ that history? If you just use this history to celebrate how great and good, the ILWU is and how wonderful the working class has been in its glorious past, without actually exposing the obstacles and how the trade union bureaucracy has at every step limited the fighting capacity of the working class then and now, if you don't do that, then what you're doing is just giving a left cover to the progressive unionists and building up this obstacle that they represent to any further struggle.
I echo what the first speaker from the floor said, Gerald, when he talked about he'd like to know more about what happened in Italy. And it's very interesting. There's a lot of talk about fascism now, what is and what isn't. The Prime Minister of Italy definitely came out of fascist tradition. She was a fascist from the time she was 14 years old, Meloni. She now says she's just a conservative, but I wonder how that conservative reacted to the general strike. Was there severe repression? Is there threats of more repression in Italy? So on. Secondly, I'm not one of the organizers of it, but there's going to be a large mobilization in Berkeley this Monday, the 10th, because the alt-right group that's not a fascist group but has a lot of fascists within it, Turning Point, is having a mass meeting at Zellenbach Auditorium at 5 o'clock. The doors open at 5, they start at 6 at Zellenbach Auditorium in Berkeley. The Turning Point group, the group that the late, not great Charles Kirk formed. And there's going to be a mobilization of various student groups, also Bay Area Resistance, and also the campus unions from UPD to SEIU to the Teachers Faculty Association and so on, a gathering outside of Zellenbach Auditorium at 4:30. And for more information, you could go to Bay Area Independent Media online, and they have a lot of comments and more data about that. So I urge people to go. Personally, speaking for myself, I hope it's militant in spirit, but not too confrontational, because I think Trump is looking for excuses to send in the National Guard. That's my 2 cents on that anyway.
My name's Joel Shore. I'm a relatively new member of this union, Local 10, ILWU, just within the past years. I come into this for decades of my life, having been in the maritime unions, and for the most part, having been what you would call a leftist. I consider myself a Trotskyist, broadly speaking. Looking around today, and trying to get people to meetings like this, in my experience, I was a merchant seaman for 20 some odd years, in a union that is considered more like a sort of a craft union. Us as leftists, people operating in the unions, we need to stop being obsessed with the correct program, okay? I'm in favor of the transitional program, doing things, but laying things out as if we can just have some kind of ideal correct program and promote it to workers is not gonna work, okay? I see very few of my fellow workers here today, and we have to accept that this union, as progressive as it's been, is really, as far as the rank and file, is not much different than any other, the Teamsters or many of the maritime unions. We have the history here in the ILWU. And that being said, the transitional program, I'm almost, okay, is my time up?
No, 30 seconds.
Okay, all right. As far as the left in general, we do need a program because, we don't have general strikes in America. The left in America wants to have a Burning Man party. Okay, that's it. The rallying cry is woo. We need to have a program, more broadly speaking, with the working class, which they can learn from the unions. So, in order to get to a general strike, the left in America needs to be more programmatic and not just, you know, no kings or something like that. That's all I got to say.
I got Jacob followed by Colleen.
I'm gonna try to project my voice through this mask, so if the people in the back can hear me, you just say thumbs up. Cool. All right. Hi everyone. My name is Jacob Macknick. I'm an Amazon worker. I'm a Teamster, member of Local 2785, here with my fellow organizing committee member Janae. I was also, along with my partner here, Kai, member of the Palestine Solidarity Movement on our college campus in spring of 2024. And I'm also a friend of the Internationalist group and the Revolutionary Internationalist Youth. And what I wanted to come up here and talk about is the importance of organization as rank and file workers and the role of students in that. Because in our warehouse, because we're on the front line of organizing and on the front line of, at least right now, helping Jeff Bezos build his next $500 million yacht, we have what's called a warehouse committee, an organizing committee, that is the nucleus of shop floor action in new worker organizing. And that existence of that warehouse committee is evidence of dual power in the warehouse, in the words of Trotsky. And these warehouse committees are necessary because they are the nucleus of action, and because also from these committees, we do political education, we do solidarity work, and those turn into rank and file caucuses and within our unions. Because as we've talked about, whether it's in the ILWU, whether it's in the teachers union, other Teamsters, what's necessary is to have a pole within the union. To have a pole within the union that acts as actual leadership for workers and not just misleadership of the bureaucrats. And so the role of the students in that is to look to the workers and do political education with them. And like I said, these committees and caucuses are necessary because as we're seeing in San Francisco today, when the nonprofit and labor bureaucrats and the Democrats start calling for a general strike, we need to be organized to push it further because we know from historical case studies that they will sell us out. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Colleen. This is my first meeting here. I'm actually visiting from Hawaii, so I'm very new to this. So I don't know if my questions will be kind of naive, but I kind of wanted to know, as someone not in a union, kind of how can I support or non-union people support, this uniting for all these unions for a general strike. And in case what that means, kind of visiting here, and this will kind of be my only meeting being here, how does, that collaboration look like with Hawaii? Because you did bring up that they did have the Hawaii 7 before, and how can we replicate that? And I think I want to touch on kind of everyone kind of brought up what happened in Italy, so kind of hearing what happened there and how can that be replicated and sustained.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like in the discussion, a lot of, or like, even overall, we've heard a lot about like united fronts, right? United fronts seem really important. The left should be doing work together to be fighting against all the various dangerous things that are happening to us. But united fronts have to be done on, like, you have to participate together and like to do something, right? You have to have concrete tasks that you're going to do. So, for example, how are you going to break illusions in like the Democratic Party? You've just got the election of Zoran Mamdani in New York. The young people and like many workers are just cheering that on. They're like, that's great that that's happening, right? What are you going to do in a united front aside from be like, don't vote for Zoran Mamdani, like the election's over, he's in power. Like, how are we going to be doing like these united front actions? ICE is on the streets, right? What exactly are we proposing? If we're going to do an arms embargo, how exactly are these united fronts going to be doing that, right? And so I think it's all well and good to call for it. A, you have to actually do the united fronts, and B, then you have to propose a plan of action that isn't just, oh, well, we need socialist revolution. Oh, well, don't vote for Mamdani. Like, we have to like be concrete about these things, and those are some things I'd like to hear a little bit more about how we do that.
Yeah, Sam, my name is Joe Wagner. I'm a transit worker in Los Angeles, and I'm a supporter of the Internationalist group. I'm a part of the Voluntary Immigrant Defense Committee in my union, which is ATU 1277. So Don C. makes a good point about in what circumstances do we work together, left groups. There's supporters of the Spartacist League in my union, and when 2 bus drivers were fired for saying that they wouldn't open their bus doors for ICE, and others went into high gear to defend those bus drivers that did what they needed to do, which is say that they wouldn't work with ICE. And so we put forward, we told the union leadership in the mechanics union that they needed to defend the bus operators who were in the bus and train workers union, right? So on a limited objective of saying we need to fight for these bus drivers to get their jobs back and full back pay with no discipline, we talked among ourselves, including supporters of the Internationalist Group, supporters of the Spartacist League. The Volunteer Immigrant Defense Committee generated members put forward a motion that I and others thought gave too much support to or too much acknowledgement to the Democratic Party. That was a couple of officials were saying, "Oh, these guys should get their job back," when the majority on the Metro board fired these guys. So the Spartacist League supporter put forward the motion that I and others thought gave too much credit to the Democratic Party. In a friendly way, I said, strike that part out. And I worked with some of the members of the Volunteer Immigrant Defense Committee to say, no, we're not going to give any credit to the Democratic Party. It's cheap words when they've done absolutely nothing. And so I worked with the SL supporters in my union, but I worked with the other members of the Volunteer Immigrant Defense Committee and says, we're not going to. Now, look, one of the gimmicks of the Spartacist League right now is that they've entered the Democratic Party Socialists of America only to call to break with the Democrats. Okay, try to make sense of it all. This is not the Socialist Party. So, yeah, to an extent, we'll work with people, but,
faces in the room, but my name's Alan. I started working with the Spartacist League about almost 50 years ago. I regard Stan Gow as a mentor. I ran into Edison a few days back, told me about the forum. I wanted to come because I believe we ought to be working together. I believe that the idea that we've got political disagreements that are real and important regarding the Russia-Ukraine war, regarding the PSL and critical support. But we also, when I look at the website, I go through the article that Jack Heyman wrote. I look at the articles, several articles. I didn't get through all of them, but the last 3. I see a lot of things I agree with. I see a lot of posters here I agree with. There are reasons for us to work together. And there are reasons that we do not share opinions. The right way to handle this is just to discuss them, to have debates. Regarding the DSA, I disagree with both the Spartacist League and with the IG. I believe that the DSA is a reformist, class collaborationist workers organization. The president of my union is a member. The AFL-CIO is run by a big section of the DSA, and I think I'm willing to hear out whether or not I am right or wrong on the issue. I think there ought to be a debate about it. But I believe that given Sanders going around, there's a radicalization among students that are on the campuses. It's not a working class radicalization.
Hello, my name is Skylar. I am a supporter of the Internationalist Group and Revolutionary Internationalist Youth. There's been a question, about what non-workers or people who aren't in unions can do to support this struggle. And as a student of Berkeley City College and Merritt City College being the birthplace of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, which is currently under threat of closure. We see the examples of 1968 France, that students getting organized alongside the power of labor, right, to shut down this society being led by the workers is crucial, right? And we know that we can't do that without clear leadership. There's been a question about if we need a program or not, a clear program, and we do, right? We need a revolutionary program. The program of Marx, Lenin, Engels, and Trotsky, right? A program to organize the students alongside the power of labor, to fight, to strike against this war, this genocide in Gaza, and to fight to stop the deportations, to smash ICE against this slide into Bonapartism by Trump. Thank you.
I think the central question here today, in many ways, is how do you actually mobilize the working class? To hot cargo military goods to Israel, in mass action against ICE and deportations and so on? And the question, of the Palestinian movement, a lot of the time, it would be which got huge demonstrations and so on, but it was all premised on the idea that you were going to be able to pressure the imperialists into playing a moral role and to stop all these, the genocide in Israel when they're the main backers and bankrollers of it. So then how do you mobilize the one class whose interests are actually completely counterposed to those who rule, the working class? You have to demonstrate that the fight for Palestinian liberation, the fight to defend immigrants, the fight against the firing of federal workers is a fight for themselves. And you have to tie it to the fight for their own material interests because they've been driven into the ground. And you unite those two things, and that's what gives the basis for moving forward on an actual anti-imperialist direction aimed at the imperialists both abroad and at the imperialist rulers here at home, and that's especially underlined here in the belly of the beast. And I'd like to thank Joe for his comments on the committee and the protests that we had in Los Angeles. It was small, but it's an example of the kind of common actions that are needed to engage with the purpose of debating a way forward on all of these issues, from the fight for Palestinian liberation to the fight for immigrant rights to the fight to stop the National Guard and so on.
I just wanted to respond quickly to the question that was raised about Zoran and whether we vote for him or not and why we don't. Now my name is Edison. I'm a supporter of the Internationalist Group and the Revolutionary Internationalist Youth as well. We defend Zoran against the racist slanders on the basis of his identity as a Muslim and as a racial minority in the United States. But we understand that Zoran comes in the lineage, it's not new, it comes in the lineage of the David Dinkins, the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, of Bernie Sanders, who only bring young people and workers who see a problem with this fundamentally flawed and broken system, who see that problem and brings them back into the Democratic Party. So damn right, we say no votes for Zoran, no votes for any capitalist politician. But we have to do more than that, bring a positive program. And the Internationalist Group, while small, fights for that. And places like here, like places in Portland, like places in New York, through labor committees, to defend immigrants, to unite with leftists and workers of different tendencies against the ICE raids, just as an example that supporters of the Internationalist Group have organized and mobilized in cities like Portland and here against fascist mobilizations of groups like Patriot Prayer. That is an example of what the power of the working class can do independent from the Democratic Party, which is necessary for fighting for a revolutionary workers' party on the road to revolution. Thank you.
The only thing that I'll say in response to the supporters of the ICL and those who, beckon us to debate is that we have debated, we have a debate, so if you haven't seen it, go watch it. And if you need to rewatch it, you can rewatch it. It starts with the embrace of bourgeois nationalism, but I'm gonna leave that there. Political clarity and revolutionary leadership is what is needed. Those are the key questions. Right now, the union bureaucracy funnels support to the Democratic Party. one of the spearheads, there's a few, but, Zoran Mamdani, who just talked about, and Brandon Johnson are some of the spearheads of the Democratic Party, getting workers, young people, and oppressed people who are fed up with the Democratic Party back into it. People have mentioned, opportunist left groups have mentioned that Brandon Johnson said the words general strike. Well, the only reason why a politician like Brandon Johnson would want to evoke a general strike is to bring that anger and that discontent back into the Democratic Party. And so the need to build a Leninist, Trotskyist, communist party, that is on the order of the day, to lead the class struggle in defense of immigrants and in defense of all the oppressed, and to a socialist revolution. That is also the case. The need to organize such a party is also true in Italy. But I'll let Jack address the questions about that. That's all.
A lot of questions. The main one is, I apologize for not going into more detail about my experience in Italy, because it was one of the most dramatic, exciting episodes in my whole history in the trade union movement. I got there for the conference, which was on the 26th and 27th. There had already been what they call a general strike, and ports had been shut down. So it was on fire. People were exhilarated. There were dock workers from France, from Greece, from Cyprus, Germany, Spain, anyway, all over Europe. And they were there to discuss how to spread these strikes for dock workers to refuse to load military cargo to Israel, to hot cargo, that cargo. And it was serious because these are unions that have already taken those actions. We even had a representative from the Palestinian trade union movement there. On the second day of the conference, this is how things are so contagious in Italy, in a good way. It's strike fever. And on the second day, there was a report that a Zim line ship was coming into a dock. So the CALP, one of the, probably the most militant union in Italy, and students rushed down to the dock. They marched to the dock, put up a picket line, and the Zim ship left the port immediately because they knew what was in store for them. Okay? That's the kind of experience that I had there. We met with dock workers from all over the world, all over Europe, but I'll have to say this. There was a dock worker who was a supporter of the ICL. Did you know that, you speakers from the Spartacus League? He was at the conference. He didn't say a word, not a word. These are the most militant workers right now in this critical period, and he abstained. That's nothing new for the Spartacus League. They've been acting that way for a long time. Now they've turned a corner, and I don't know where they're going. But what's happening in Italy now can spread, and they're trying to spread it now. On the 28th, there's supposed to be a general strike in Italy. That's what they're calling for. And November 28th, and they're calling on dock workers around the world to follow their example. And that's what we should be doing. And not just following their example of taking those actions, but when dock workers are victimized, then we have to defend them. And that's why I mentioned to Newt, we need to bring up a resolution at the executive board, which is only a few days from now, to defend Marcos Bekris, the president of the Greek dockworkers. Okay? So what you have in Italy now there was an IDC, International Dockworkers Council, that used to be militant. They grew out of the Liverpool docker struggle of the last century, end of the last century. They were militant. They now have been taken over by the ILA, the most conservative dockworkers union, I would say, in any country. During the celebration for the Charleston Five, which was an immense, important struggle in this country, the international president, Harold Daggett of the ILA, put forward a letter to Donald Trump congratulating him for bombing the Iran nuclear sites. This was on the first day of a celebration for the Charleston Five victory. The IDC immediately got together and they put out a counter statement, which was pacifist, saying, we won't work military cargo, which was a fraud because the ILA always works military cargo. And so you have the IDC now, which was an international dockworkers movement, being controlled by a right-wing, pro-imperialist union, a social imperialist union in the United States. They expelled the European dockworkers, most of the European dockworkers, and the EDC, the European Dockworkers Council, has been taking actions, refusing to load military cargo to Israel, in France, in Spain, and one other country, no, not Portugal. Spain, France, anyway, the point is this, that some of their member affiliates have taken action. But what needs to be done, the real actions that are taking place, that are real movements to stop the flow of military cargo, is coming from trade unions that aren't in either the IDC or the EDC. The Greeks and the Italians are not affiliated to those organizations. There needs to be a reorganization of militant dockworkers unions, not only in Europe, but around the world, that can take on such an important moral issue of a genocide. That you got to be able to refuse to load the bombs that are killing people. It's not that difficult to understand. The problem is the trade union bureaucracies. And I've said it a few times already, that the only way that workers have made advances is, first off, fighting their own trade union bureaucracy, which is complicit with the capitalist order. I don't know, some Max or someone from the SL. I mean, how many times do I have to say that in my talk? My God, I said this union was formed by fighting the bureaucracy. The Teamsters in '34 waged a tremendous struggle against the Teamster bureaucracy. And the same with the auto life. I mean, I'm not going to go over that. I don't have time for that. But the important thing about what's happening in Italy is that they have lit a fire. And that fire can spread. And it needs to spread here. The local on the West Coast that's most likely to take an action would be right here. And we need to organize that through the executive board and through the rank and file to take an action. So I said they called for 28th, they call for strikes around the world, Steve. Now, the next thing is, I got a couple questions from the Spartacus League that I want to address. First of all, Don, of course, you understand, I think, what a united front is. It's around a specific action. And you have limited demands, not a laundry list, limited demands, not a propaganda block, but limited demands around a specific action. So I think that any leftist Marxist organization would come together on the basis of, let's go down to the port, work with the union, and stop this ship from being loaded. Military cargo. I don't know specifically, concretely, what the SL is proposing, but this is what I will say about the SL. There are 5 actions in my lifetime, over a half a century, in the maritime industry, that have confirmed my belief that the only way forward is through class struggle, through ultimately a workers' revolution, to replace the capitalist governments with a fighting revolutionary workers' party. And that was confirmed. Number 1, in 1984, the anti-apartheid action at Pier 80 in San Francisco. The Spartacist League was AWOL. They were not there. They abstained. Abstained. Number 2 that was important for me was the Liverpool Dockers struggle from 1996 to 1998. They waged an international campaign. This local here was the first to get on board to support them. We had an executive board meeting. I proposed a resolution, and we immediately called to the Liverpool Dockers to come to the United States. They spoke at our convention, and not only did we give them money to fund their strike, but we shut down the ports, all the ports on the West Coast on Martin Luther King's birthday to support them. That was the second thing that confirmed in my mind that what I was doing in terms of a class struggle was right. The Liverpool Dockers struggle was really important. It linked together the most militant unions on the planet. They all came together for one purpose: to refuse to load or unload scab cargo from Liverpool. The next thing was the Charleston 5 campaign. When in Charleston, a scab company came into this right-to-work state, and they brought in scabs to do the work of striking longshoremen. I was having breakfast with my wife. I saw the New York Times, a picture of black and white workers together fighting against the police. And I immediately took it to the executive board. And we said they need to be defended because their own union bureaucracy is not defending them. And the executive board voted unanimously to send me and the president of the union, Lawrence Thibault, to South Carolina. That's where the Civil War began. The majority of dockworkers unions in the South and in the Gulf are black. Why? Because they were the ancestors of slaves that did that work before the Civil War. And so these dockworkers, the longshoremen in Charleston, when we went out there, we brought them to our convention. We ended up getting the whole state of California AFL-CIO to back their struggle, while their own union leadership in New York was sabotaging it. They were telling other locals, don't support them. They're being influenced by communists. Don't support them. We got the California AFL-CIO, and then we got this entire AFL-CIO, and finally, the president of the ILA, John Bowers, came to support them, and the first thing he puts out about supporting them, if you're going to send money for this cause, send it to me. That's how the trade union bureaucracies work. Okay, that's the second action that I took, third rather, that confirmed that the class struggle program works. And then in collaboration with the internationalist group in 2008, we coopered together a resolution to shut down every port on the West Coast to oppose the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Again, that was effective. The whole West Coast was shut down. Was the Spartacus League around anywhere? No, they abstained on that one too. I mean, finally, in 2017, when the Patriot Prayer, the fascist group, put out the word that they're going to have a rally, a fascist rally at Crissy Field, the president of the local, I was retired then, the president of the local called me and said, Jack, we need a resolution to stop the fascists. And I put forward a resolution that was counterposed to what the union bureaucrats of the AFL-CIO were doing. They were having a rally against the fascists on the other end of San Francisco. Local 10 had a resolution to rally right where the fascists were going to march or rally. And guess what? They decided discretion was the better part of valor, and they canceled their rally. Every one of those actions reassured me that I was on the right course in terms of class struggle action. Every one of those that I just mentioned, the Spartacus League abstained from every one of them. Absolutely true. Which one? You tell me. Which?
Charleston and the fascists. And yeah, there's bad blood and there's a sectarian history of
where were you?
But that doesn't answer the question of what we need to do.
Where were you involved in Charleston? I was there. No, that's right. Excuse me. One of their leading comrades did go down for one day. That was terrific. Listen, I have the floor now. I didn't interrupt you, all right? The point is, this is a political question. The internationalist group will have united fronts with any principled organization that has a limited demand, that is principled, and that we know give us sufficient time to organize for it. You know, that's basic Leninism. We don't have to agree on everything. But to stop military cargo to Israel is pretty clear. We can do that. The thing about the Spartacus League, besides being abstentionist, it's nothing new. They put it out in their newspaper. They say, workers brace for impact, duck for cover. The next issue, dig in, don't give up. They're saying that it's only going to get worse. You have to chill. That's not what revolutionary parties do. Revolutionary parties, even when you're in the minority, you push for your principles amongst the working class. The Spartacus League doesn't do that. They abstain. Thank you.
I apologize in advance because we have a hard cutoff to let the union do what they do. So the cutoff time is really right now. Just to piggyback on the energy of the room, we have to know where we came from to know where we're going. We have to have goals that have been achieved and know the goals that need to be achieved. Boycotting the military cargo coming in and out of harbors globally is a must. I would say equally as important is to stand down on ICE.
Yeah.
Because people are being snatched from their homes left and right. To quote one of our famous comrades, I am the people, I love the people, I am a revolutionary. Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. Yeah. Revolutionary, I want to say they all tell the truth, but I can't say that like you, Sister Emily. I don't necessarily know that. But what I will say is the truth will be told here right now. And the word union derives from unity. Brown people across this country have been racially denied being parts of unions. So when we talk about unions, let's get into it because we're scratching the surface of the beginning of racism, even in the forming of unions. So the real union is a unity in the people. And the working class, I always told my brother, big brother Jack Heyman, he said, we got to represent the working class. I don't represent the working class because my friends and family can't get a job for whatever reason because they've been racially profiled, driving while looking like me, have a record of some sort, and can't get a job. So I'm speaking for the people, and if the people come out here, and when ICE drags these people from their home, from their job, from their car, and the people stand around that car and stop 5 masked men from driving away with that person, they're not going to run. They may run over 10, but they won't run over 100. The people have to come out here and lay on the ground in front of these cranes, in front of these harbors. The students, my comrade Skylar, I don't necessarily know you personally, but I love the energy that you bring. I would want you next to me all day long, talking about budgets being cut from school systems. This is the fight. The fight is not internally. We superficially talk about tiers systems within the union, but I can't even get a job. What tier system is that? What about the tier system of credit, where if I can't get credit, I can't get a car to get to and from work, or I can't buy a house that's in my neighborhood where I work? What about that? What about standing down on federal taxes where my tax dollars, where are they going? To lock up more people? The biggest mental institution in the United States is called the prison system. What about that? So I don't want to keep everybody, but the armchair revolutionary in my heart has been dead for years. If we're going to get out here, let's not fake talk about it. Let's go to work. When I left this, I said, let's go to work. It's not the union of Local 10. It's the people that birthed the people that are in Local 10. It's the people that are the family of Local 10. It's the people of the community of Alameda, San Francisco, and the surrounding counties. It's the people of the state. It's the people of the country. We need to go to work. And when I say go to work, I'm not talking about for a paycheck. I'm talking about go to work on overturning the systematic unequalization of this country. That's what I'm talking about, go to work on. Let's go to work and overthrow this government. Power to the people.